What if everything you believe about life, death, and destiny was incomplete? What if what you call coincidence was actually a subtle reminder that the spirit world is trying to speak to you? There are times when we feel an inexplicable chill, hear our name in the silence of the night, or dream of someone who has passed away, and suddenly we wake up with the feeling that something has changed within us. Have you ever experienced this? Today, you'll learn about 7 experiences from the afterlife, revealed by Emmanuel, Chico Xavier's spirit guide, that defy human logic, touch our hearts, and completely change the way we view life after death. These are psychographed messages filled with wisdom and compassion that seem to transcend time and speak directly to the soul of those awake enough to hear. Stay with me until the end, because what you discover now may surprise you. For decades, Emmanuel was the spiritual mentor who guided Chico Xavier on his missions, imparting messages about reincarnation, evolution, love, and spiritual responsibility. His words were not meant merely to comfort but to awaken. He spoke of an invisible plane where nothing is lost and where every thought, feeling, and action has a direct impact on our destiny. A world that is not out there, but all around us, vibrating at frequencies few can perceive. Imagine for a moment that death is not an end, but a return. That each soul, upon leaving the body, awakens to a new reality where everything experienced is revealed clearly. Emmanuel said that in the spiritual realm, nothing remains hidden, and that true life begins precisely when we believe we have lost it. This idea changes everything. Because if consciousness persists, if love does not die, then life here is merely a preparation for something much greater. And perhaps that's why so many of Emmanuel's psychographed accounts speak of learning, forgiveness, and rebuilding. He described the afterlife as a school of souls, where spirits gather to understand the meaning of their earthly experiences. And when we think about this, it's impossible not to wonder how much of what we experience today is truly guided by forces we can't see. How often are coincidences actually answers from the other side? With each message, Emmanuel invites us to reflect on the purpose of pain, the value of loss, and the grandeur of love that transcends the boundaries of death. And as we delve into these stories from the beyond, something within us awakens, an ancient memory, a gentle premonition that we once knew these truths. We simply forgot them for a time. Perhaps because we are so occupied with the material world that we fail to hear the subtle voice that comes from the invisible. There are those who doubt, there are those who question, and there are those who feel, in the deepest silence, that it all makes sense. Emmanuel said that faith is not born from what is seen, but from what is felt. And when you begin to feel, the impossible ceases to be a word. It becomes merely a limitation of the mind. That's when the boundaries between the visible and the invisible dissolve, and what seemed like a mystery begins to become a revelation. So, get ready. Because the experiences of the afterlife you'll discover next aren't just stories to entertain. They're invitations to awaken. Each one carries a truth that can completely change the way you understand existence, death, and the destiny of the soul. And the more you listen, the more you'll realize that the afterlife is much closer than you imagine. What if everything you call death were just a deep sleep that awakens you to a different reality? What if strange sensations, a shiver in the middle of the night, a dream that keeps coming back, the feeling that a loved one is by your side, were clear signs that there is continuity, an afterlife that doesn't fit into rational explanations? Have you ever experienced this? Stay with me until the end, because what you'll discover now may surprise you and change your perspective on spirituality, reincarnation, and the role of messages from the beyond in our daily lives. Over the decades, the psychographies attributed to Emmanuel through Chico Xavier have opened doors to an understanding that defies common sense. We are not isolated, and each earthly experience leaves marks that reverberate in the spiritual realm. Few people know or allow themselves to believe that consciousness continues and that the separation we call death is often merely a transition. Emmanuel describes a scenario where the soul is not lost, but rediscovered, where bonds of affection resist what we consider the end, where what we do here has repercussions that transcend time. These are messages from beyond that invite us to look at everyday life with new eyes. Imagine, for a moment, that the pain you carry today is the raw material for a spiritual refinement, a process of purification that doesn't punish but educates. Emmanuel speaks of suffering as a rigorous teacher who transforms, not as punishment. What if frustration, loss, and grief are, in other words, necessary stages for the soul's growth? When we understand the harvest of actions, we realize that each choice generates an echo. What we emit returns, shaping our destiny and the collective. This notion of spiritual responsibility yields profound reflections on ethics, forgiveness, and solidarity, themes that resonate strongly in the psychographed messages that have reached us. At the same time, there's the comforting promise of reunion. Emmanuel describes encounters with loved ones who weren't severed by death. On the contrary, these bonds are revealed more clearly and intensely on the other side. It's not just comfort, it's information that changes the way we say goodbye and how we experience our relationships. And if you've ever felt the subtle presence of someone who's passed away, perhaps it was one of these encounters, proof that there are mentors and spiritual guides working behind the scenes of our existence, pointing the way and inspiring choices without noise or fanfare. And we cannot forget the schools of the afterlife, where, according to Emmanuel, learning continues. The evolution of the spirit does not end with the body. There are tasks, missions, and opportunities for reparation that follow after the passing. When we think about this, the idea of purpose takes on another dimension. Our earthly experiences fit into a larger map, and the future of humanity, according to these messages, points to a cycle of regeneration, where love and understanding will replace fear and division. If all this sounds too distant or incredible, I invite you to remain curious. As you listen to these 7 experiences from the beyond, you may recognize sensations, memories, and intuitions that until now seemed unexplainable. Now take a deep breath and prepare yourself, because in the next part, we'll delve into the first experience, and the discovery it brings may transform the way you look at life. Death and the destiny of the soul. What if death weren't the end, but merely the awakening to a new way of life? What if every thought, every gesture, every emotion you convey left an invisible mark on the universe, an energy that continues to act even after the body falls silent? Few people stop to think about this, but Emmanuel, the spirit who accompanied Chico Xavier for decades, revealed in his messages something that can completely change the way we view existence. What you're about to hear now isn't just a story. It's an invitation to understand what lies behind the veil, where life continues and learning never ends. Emmanuel presents the afterlife not as a dark mystery, but as a natural extension of life. According to him, no one truly dies, they simply awaken. The spirit frees itself from the physical body and begins to perceive a broader reality, where time and space function differently. It's like waking from a dream and suddenly understanding the meaning of everything you've experienced. Have you ever had that feeling of déjà vu, as if something were familiar, even though you've never experienced it before? Perhaps they are echoes of this other dimension, subtle memories of experiences the spirit already knows. Stay with me until the end. What you discover now may deeply surprise you, but Emmanuel also warns us. Everything we do here has consequences there. No action is wasted, no thought is wasted. He calls this the harvest of actions, the spiritual reflection of our choices. Every word spoken, every feeling nurtured, returns to us as a lesson. It's not punishment. It's natural law. What we send out, we receive. And when you think about all the difficult situations in your life, the pain, the losses, the disagreements, you might realize that it's all part of a greater plan for the soul's growth. And what about reunions? Emmanuel asserts that the bonds of love are not broken by death. On the contrary, they become even stronger. True love, according to him, is an energy that transcends time. That's why sometimes we feel the presence of someone who has already passed away. A light breeze, a familiar scent, a dream so real it feels like an encounter. Have you ever felt something like this? Perhaps it wasn't just a memory, but a real, silent contact coming from the spiritual realm. In the world beyond matter, learning continues. Emmanuel describes schools, colonies, and study centers where spirits gather to understand their mistakes and plan new opportunities for evolution. The spirit, contrary to what many believe, is not confined to contemplation. It works, learns, serves, and continues its journey toward perfection. This completely changes our view of death. It is not the end. It is merely a passage to a new cycle of learning. And amidst all this, Emmanuel talks about mentors and spiritual guides, beings who accompany us on our journey, inspire our decisions, and often subtly intervene to protect us. How many times have you escaped something by the skin of your teeth? How many times has an idea, an intuition, come at just the right moment? Emmanuel would say, these are signs of the presence of these invisible guides, working to keep us on the right path. Finally, there is the theme that inspires the most hope in Emmanuel's messages, the future of humanity. He reveals that we are moving toward an era of regeneration, where love will replace fear, awareness will overcome ignorance, and pain will give way to learning. A time when humanity will finally understand that everything is interconnected: matter, spirit, the visible, and the invisible. But what does this mean in practice for each of us? How do these experiences from the beyond manifest themselves here in our daily lives, in our challenges, in our choices, and in our deepest feelings? That's what we're going to talk about now. And perhaps as you listen, you'll realize that the answers you've always sought were already closer than you imagined. What if the answers you so desperately seek about pain, fear, loneliness, or the meaning of life were already within you, just waiting for the right moment to awaken? What if what Emmanuel revealed through Chico Xavier's psychographies wasn't just a message from beyond, but a spiritual map for the challenges we face every day here on Earth? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover now could completely change the way you see the world, people, and even yourself. We live in times of anxiety, haste, and disconnection. We seek answers on screens, in quick advice, in distractions that distance us from the essential. But Emmanuel, with the serenity of someone who has already understood the other side of existence, reminds us of something we've forgotten. Everything we experience here is a learning experience. Every pain, every loss, every encounter, nothing is by chance. When life seems to fall apart, perhaps the Spirit is trying to teach you something that can only be understood through experience. Have you ever felt like a difficulty repeated itself until finally something clicked within you? Perhaps this was the voice of your own spirit trying to guide you toward evolution. Emmanuel's messages remain incredibly relevant, even though they were written decades ago. He spoke about fear, that energy that paralyzes the soul, and how it is the opposite of love. He said that while fear closes us off, love opens us to the world, and that by choosing love, even in the most difficult situations, we create invisible bridges that connect our lives to something much greater. Think about it. How many times has an act of kindness, a simple gesture, completely changed the course of a day? Perhaps it was one of those spiritual seeds that Emmanuel said every act of love leaves planted in the universe. The most impressive thing is that his messages don't ask for blind faith, they ask for awareness. Emmanuel spoke of spiritual responsibility, showing that every thought is a creative force and that our reality begins within us. When we harbor anger, fear, or guilt, we vibrate at frequencies that attract more of the same. But when we cultivate peace, compassion, and forgiveness, we become instruments of light. And this isn't poetry, it's spiritual law, it's cause and effect in action. On days when the world seems cold and chaotic, Emmanuel invites us to remember that life doesn't end in matter. Existence is a continuous cycle, and every difficulty we face here has a purpose later. Anxiety, grief, the feeling of emptiness, all of these are the universe's nudge for us to look within. Because, as he said, no one evolves by fleeing pain, but rather by understanding what it came to teach. And perhaps the true miracle isn't seeing spirits or hearing voices from beyond, but learning to listen to one's own soul, which speaks softly. In moments of silence and introspection, these reflections are a reminder that the spiritual world is not separate from us. It pulsates here now, in our choices, our gestures, and the small decisions of our daily lives. Emmanuel said that each person is a living temple, a point of light, capable of transforming the environment around them. And when we understand this, we realize that the beyond does not begin after death. It is already happening in every thought, in every action that vibrates beyond the visible. Few people realize, but the true meaning of the messages from beyond is this: to live with greater awareness, more love, and more purpose. And this is what Emmanuel always spoke about the ability to transform the world, starting with inner transformation. But how can we apply these teachings in practice amid the chaos, injustice, and rush of modern life? How can we use Emmanuel's lessons to navigate fear, suffering, and relationships today? That's what you'll understand in the next part. And perhaps, as you listen, you'll realize that the changes the world needs begin now, within you. What if everything you've experienced so far was just the beginning of a much larger journey? What if the coincidences, encounters, and even the losses that have marked your life were actually subtle signs that there's something or someone guiding you all along? Perhaps experiences from the beyond aren't just distant tales, but reminders that we come from a greater place, and that sooner or later we all return home. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear now may touch parts of your soul that have been dormant for a long time. The spiritual messages attributed to Emmanuel through Chico Xavier are much more than just psychographed texts. They are open windows between two worlds. They speak of love, forgiveness, new beginnings, and the certainty that nothing, absolutely nothing, is lost in the universe. When we read or hear his words, it's as if a silent presence envelops us, reminding us that life doesn't end with death, and that every act of kindness is a step toward the light. Emmanuel said that experiences of the afterlife are not in the future, but happen now in every elevated thought, in every conscious choice. Think for a moment. How many times have you felt something inexplicable? A shiver that came out of nowhere, a memory that suddenly appeared, a feeling of being supported even in the midst of pain. Few people admit it, but many have experienced it. And these moments are, perhaps, reminders that the spiritual world is closer than we imagine. Emmanuel affirmed that we are constantly accompanied by loving intelligences, inspiring and sustaining us when we think we are alone. And if you pay attention, you will notice signs everywhere, in the words of someone who appears at the right moment, in a dream that feels like a message, in a silence that brings unexplained peace. The most beautiful thing about Emmanuel's lessons is that they don't speak of fear, but of hope. He invites us to look at life with gratitude, to understand that each obstacle is a learning step, that tears have a purpose, and that pain doesn't come to punish, but to transform. When we understand this, we begin to see the divine in the small details, in the compassion of a stranger, in the smile of someone who forgives, in the sunrise after a long night. Spirituality, as Emmanuel teaches, is not in the heights, but in the simple, in the way we treat others, in the intentions we carry, in the energy we spread. These experiences from the beyond are like mirrors. They show us who we truly are, evolving spirits, learning to love, falling and beginning again, always guided by something greater. Emmanuel said that we come from a home of light, and that all suffering on earth is fleeting, like a shadow that dissolves when the soul awakens. And perhaps that's why, upon hearing these messages, something within us recognizes an ancient truth, that life doesn't end, it merely changes form. What Emmanuel wanted to remind us is both simple and profound, that love is indestructible, that consciousness never dies, and that every human experience is part of a greater plan. And now, perhaps you're wondering, among all these revelations, which one touched your heart the most? Which message seems to have been written for you? Think about it. And if you'd like, share it in the comments. Sometimes, when we share what we feel, we help others find the same path of light. If you believe the spiritual world can teach us much about life here on earth, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. There are many messages from beyond that still need to be told. Stories of faith, love, and reunions that time never erases. And perhaps next time, you'll discover that the invisible has always been right before your eyes. What if everything we're talking about now has awakened something within you? A memory, an emotion, a feeling that you've experienced something similar. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what touched you most. Sometimes your experience might be just what someone else needs to read to find a little hope. Each comment here becomes a thread of light, connecting stories, hearts, and learning that goes far beyond the screen. When you share what you feel, when you leave your opinion or your testimony, this space ceases to be just a channel and becomes a true spiritual community, a place where every voice matters, where every story counts, where the invisible takes shape through words. And this has enormous power, because the more people participate, the more this message spreads, reaching those who may be silent, needing a word of comfort, an answer, or just the reminder that they are not alone. So if this conversation touched you in any way, please leave a like. It may seem like a small gesture, but it makes all the difference. Your click shows YouTube that this type of content matters, that it's worth continuing to share Emmanuel's messages, stories from the beyond, reflections on life, and what comes next. Each like is like a spark that helps this light reach further, crossing borders, fears, and doubts. And if you feel this is the kind of message the world needs to hear more, subscribe to the channel. Here, each new video is an invitation to look beyond the material, to understand the purpose behind our experiences, and to strengthen the faith that sometimes the rush of life tries to erase. When you subscribe and activate the bell, you not only follow the next stories, but also help keep this bridge between the visible and the invisible alive, this chain of love and learning that Emmanuel taught us so much to build. Your presence here is what gives meaning to all this. It's what keeps this energy circulating, what makes the channel grow and reach more souls who, like you, seek to understand the mystery of existence with a perspective of peace and hope. So stay with me, because what comes next will further deepen this connection between who we are now and who we will continue to be far beyond this life. What if everything you believe about life, death, and destiny were incomplete? Have you ever considered the possibility that everything we call the end might just be a passage, a change of state, a silent crossing between worlds that coexist all the time, even if we don't realize it? What you're about to hear now is not a simple story, nor a distant theory. These are revelations that defy logic, touch the heart, and open a window to something far greater than any human explanation. These are the experiences of the beyond, those that Emmanuel, the wise spirit who accompanied Chico Xavier, described so clearly that they continue to echo among us to this day. Like a call from the invisible, Emmanuel didn't speak to impress, but to awaken. His messages have endured through time because they convey a truth that never fades, that life goes on, that love never dies, and that every step we take here on earth is just part of a much broader journey, a journey of the soul. He said that the spiritual world is not a distant place, but a natural extension of consciousness itself. That no one dies, they simply awaken to a new reality. And perhaps this is the most disconcerting revelation of all. The beyond is not there. It is here, now coexisting with us, vibrating at a different frequency, waiting for the moment when our perception opens enough to recognize it. How many times have you felt an inexplicable presence? A sudden chill, a memory that came out of nowhere, a silent voice inside your mind saying, "Go this way." Emmanuel called this attunement. He explained that spirituality is constantly trying to communicate with us through thoughts, coincidences, and intuitions. But caught up in the hustle and bustle of the material world, we often don't notice. We live surrounded by noise, distracted by appearances, and we forget to listen to what comes from within. And it is precisely when silence arrives, in moments of pain, loss, or loneliness, that the soul becomes more receptive to voices from beyond. These experiences don't happen by chance. They are invitations to look within, to adjust course, to understand that nothing in life is random. Emmanuel said that everything that happens to us is a response to something we emit, a thought, a choice, an intention. The universe, according to him, is a mirror of consciousness. What we send out returns. What we sow, we reap. Not as punishment, but as a learning experience. Because true divine justice is not punitive, it is educational. Every pain, every loss, every obstacle carries a hidden lesson, a reminder that we are still being shaped by the love and wisdom of time. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when Emmanuel spoke about life after death, he wasn't just describing an ethereal heaven or a symbolic hell. He spoke of organized spiritual communities, of schools where the spirit continues to study and work, of hospitals where souls in imbalance are treated with energy and compassion. Imagine this. While here we struggle with our daily challenges, there, on the spiritual plane, there is a living, dynamic structure where each being finds what they need to continue evolving. And the most curious thing is that, according to Emmanuel, what defines the place where each soul awakens after death is not the judgment of a distant God, but the inner state they themselves have constructed. No one is sent anywhere. We are naturally drawn to an environment that vibrates at the same frequency as what we carry within. If we live with love, we find harmony. If we cultivate hatred or selfishness, we encounter shadows of our own creation. This is the hidden truth behind all beliefs. The afterlife reflects who we are. This vision changes everything. Because when we understand that every thought, every emotion, and every attitude has a direct impact on what we are building spiritually, we begin to live more consciously. We begin to see the present as part of an ongoing journey, one that doesn't end with the death of the body, but expands far beyond it. And perhaps that's why Emmanuel insisted so much on the idea of spiritual responsibility, not out of fear, but out of love. He taught us that true transformation begins when we recognize that heaven and hell are not places. They are states of the soul. It's curious to think that in the 21st century, with so much technology and so much information, we still seek answers to questions Emmanuel had already posed. What is destiny? Why do we suffer? What lies after death? The answer, according to him, lies in consciousness. And this consciousness is alive, eternal, and indestructible. Even when the body sleeps in the grave, the spirit awakens and continues its journey, learning, loving, and growing. Perhaps that's why so many people who experience near-death experiences return different. They report feelings of peace, of fulfillment, of a reconnection with something greater. They say they saw a light, felt an indescribable love. Emmanuel explained that these moments are small openings in the veil, gaps through which the soul glimpses its true home. And when it returns, nothing seems the same. Because those who touch the invisible, even for an instant, never see the world the same way again. And therein lies the power of these revelations. They aren't just stories from the afterlife. They are reminders that we are on a constant journey of expansion, that everything we experience here has a hidden purpose, a greater reason, and that when we look at life through this lens, even suffering takes on new meaning. Pain ceases to be a burden and becomes a tool for refinement, an opportunity for growth. Because, in the end, spirituality is not separate from practical life. It is the beating heart of every decision we make, of every transformation we choose to experience. Emmanuel said that by understanding the laws of the Spirit, we learn to live better on earth, with more empathy, more serenity, and above all, with more purpose. And perhaps this is what he most wanted to show us, that the spiritual world is not the later, it is the now. We just need to open the right eyes to see it. Comment there. That makes sense to me. What if everything you think you know about life, death and destiny were just the surface of something much greater? When we begin to examine Emmanuel's psychographies with a perspective that goes beyond superficial curiosity, we perceive a sequence of revelations that serve as clues about consciousness, about responsibility, about the real impact of our decisions. Few people realize that between the lines of these messages, there is a hidden truth that can transform our mindset and the way we navigate our own journey. These are not abstract teachings. They are practical guidelines that speak directly to the background of our existence, inviting us to rethink habits, feelings, and even our notions of success or failure. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject because it is there, in detail, that the great transformations begin to occur. Let's begin with the premise that Emmanuel made so clearly. Consciousness doesn't disappear. The notion that no one truly dies completely redefines the concept of loss. When we understand that the soul simply transitions to a dimension where perception is broader, everything takes on new meaning. The love we feel for someone who has passed away isn't lost. It evolves, realigns. This perspective alters our approach to grief and longing, transforming them into processes of inner reconnection, stages of emotional reconstruction. It's a shift in mindset that impacts everyday decisions, such as how to say goodbye, honor memories, and cultivate emotional presence while there's still time. In parallel, Emmanuel spoke insistently about the harvest of actions, an idea that, in practice, is a law of cause and effect applied to emotional and moral life. It's not a punitive tribunal, but a subtle form of mathematics. What we emit, words, intentions, resentments, or gestures of compassion, returns to us with proportional force. This has immediate implications for how we make decisions. Every ethical choice, no matter how small, leaves seeds. These seeds shape not only our destiny, but also the collective. Thinking this way alters the priority of our actions. It leads us to value coherence, forgiveness, and generosity more highly as instruments of personal and social transformation. And there's an equally comforting layer to the revelations about reuniting with loved ones. Emmanuel describes these bonds as lasting and intensified on a spiritual level. This isn't vague consolation. It's information that changes the way we experience relationships. Separation ceases to be a definitive rupture and becomes an interval, a cycle that will be completed at another time. For those who have felt subtle presences, an unexpected scent, a recurring dream, a sense of support, these experiences take on practical meaning, becoming more than mere coincidences and signs of continuity. This understanding changes our attitude toward loss, fostering a more serene and hopeful stance toward the unknown. Later, when describing learning on the spiritual plane, Emmanuel presents us with a behind-the-scenes view that is both pedagogical and comforting. The afterlife, according to him, is organized into colonies, schools, and work centers where the spirit, freed from its physical envelope, is equipped to repair, study, and plan new phases. It's a structure that resembles, by analogy, educational systems. There are levels, tasks, and exercises designed for evolution. Realizing this today, in a world obsessed with immediate results, is a call to patience and long-term vision. It means accepting that true transformation is gradual, made up of small decisions that, together, promote a profound change in character and destiny, and the role of mentors and spiritual guides deserves special attention because it explains many of the intuitions we take for granted. Emmanuel describes beings of light who silently accompany and inspire our path, intervening at key moments through intuitions, providential encounters, and discreet signs. Recognizing this presence alters our relationship with intuition. We begin to treat it as a legitimate channel of information and not just a whim of the mind. This openness improves decision-making, increases confidence in choices that arise from within, and connects us to an invisible support network that operates behind the scenes of life. When it comes to suffering, Emmanuel's narrative breaks with simplistic explanations. Suffering for him is a refinement, a forge where the spirit is shaped. It's not about romanticizing pain, but about understanding its transformative potential. This idea is a practical key for those seeking meaning in crises. Instead of running away from pain, we can integrate it as fuel for a change in behavior and mindset. Real transformation requires the courage to face mistakes, revise patterns, and rewrite internal stories that limit us. It's an invitation to emotional responsibility and continuous renewal. Finally, there is an optimistic projection about humanity's future, a vision Emmanuel shared as hope, a time of regeneration, in which love and understanding overcome fear and division. This prediction is not an automatic promise. It is a stimulus for collective action. If each person internalizes the notion that their choices have spiritual and social repercussions, the collective impact can catalyze an epochal shift. The idea is not passive. It is a call for inner leadership, for the creation of a new mindset that prioritizes the common good, empathy, and mutual growth. By weaving together these experiences, consciousness after death, the harvest of actions, reunions, spiritual schools, mentors, the refinement of suffering, and the vision of regeneration, a practical map is formed for those seeking to live with greater meaning. It's not about abandoning reason, but about integrating it with a renewed sensitivity, an everyday ethic that transforms small actions into great effects. And when we begin to act this way, life ceases to be just an accumulation of events and becomes an intentional journey, where each step reverberates far beyond the visible. Comment here, I'm on this journey too. Perhaps humanity's greatest mistake has been to believe that the spiritual world is a distant place, accessible only to the enlightened or the departed. Emmanuel always tried to show us that the afterlife is not out there, but rather in subtle layers of the very space we inhabit now. It's as if we were immersed in an invisible ocean, where every thought, every emotion, and every decision creates ripples that spread far beyond what we can see. When we understand this, we begin to see life differently. We realize that nothing is by chance, that every encounter, every loss, and every challenge has a deeper purpose than we imagined. This realization changes everything: the way we react, the weight we give to problems, the meaning we give to the word live. Experiences in the afterlife are not symbolic tales or comfortable illusions. They are reminders that we come from a greater place and that one day we will all return home. Each one carries a lesson about spiritual responsibility, about cause and effect, and about the power we have to co-create our own story. When Emmanuel speaks of consciousness after death, about reunions, and about learning on the spiritual plane, he is not describing a metaphysical fantasy, but a mirror of what we experience here, only with the masks removed. Life in the afterlife is the continuation of our own consciousness, and this confronts us with a hidden and transformative truth. We are constantly writing, with our actions and intentions, the script of what we will experience next. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding the spiritual world also means understanding the inner workings of our emotions. How many times have you felt an unexplainable emptiness, a seemingly nameless longing, a sensation that someone, silently, was with you. Emmanuel explains that this type of feeling is the most subtle form of communication between dimensions. They are loving presences, souls connected to us by ancient bonds, who continue to care for, inspire, and protect us, even when we don't realize it. It is in this invisible intertwining that the true meaning of the word eternity resides. It doesn't mean infinite time, but rather an unbreakable connection. The great revelation Emmanuel leaves us is that the human spirit is a traveler of eternity, and the body is merely the temporary vehicle of an expanding consciousness. This journey, full of new beginnings and learning, teaches us that nothing is lost. Joys, loves, regrets, everything stays with us, shaping who we will be tomorrow. This is a difficult truth to assimilate because it confronts us with our own responsibility. If life continues, then what we do here matters infinitely more than we think. Every choice, every thought cultivated, every gesture of compassion or indifference echoes like an energetic signature we leave in the universe. When Emmanuel speaks of suffering as the refining of the soul, he is not romanticizing pain, but revealing its hidden function, awakening. Pain breaks down old structures, forces introspection, and makes the soul listen to itself. It is through pain that great leaps in consciousness are born. No real transformation comes from comfort. It arises when we are pushed beyond what we believe to be our limits. This perspective changes how we view crises. They cease to be punishments and become invitations to expansion. Everything that forces us to delve deep within ourselves is, in fact, a portal, and it is precisely this understanding that prepares humanity for what Emmanuel called the age of regeneration, a phase in which fear begins. To lose its power and love becomes the center of human decisions. It seems distant, but it is already happening, silently in individual choices, in the small actions that repeat themselves every day. Each time someone chooses to forgive instead of hurting, to understand instead of judging, a fragment of this new world manifests. It is the sum of these invisible gestures that builds collective regeneration. This transition, however, requires more than faith. It requires spiritual lucidity, and lucidity is realizing that the spiritual world is not a destination, but an extension of the consciousness we now carry. Emmanuel's messages invite us to live now according to the laws of love, cause and effect, compassion and responsibility. Because when the soul learns these laws in practice, life, even on earth, begins to resemble heaven. The beauty of this teaching is that it doesn't impose, it awakens. Emmanuel never intended for humanity to become blind believers, but rather to become conscious of its own immortality. He invites us to look within and realize that the true temple lies in the silence of consciousness, and that communion with the divine occurs when we act with kindness, even without recognition, even when no one is watching. This is the kind of wisdom that transcends religions. It is a living philosophy, applied to everyday life, to traffic, to discussions, to work decisions, to the way we treat those we love. When we begin to see life this way, everything shifts in scale. What once seemed unfair takes on meaning. What once seemed like a loss reveals itself as a lesson learned. What once seemed like an end reveals itself as merely a new beginning. And it is at this point that we understand that Emmanuel wasn't just talking about death or the afterlife, but about a shift in mindset, a turning point capable of freeing us from the limited vision of time and fear. He spoke of transformation, of the courage to look within and realize that infinity begins precisely there, where the ego ends and consciousness awakens. Comment there. That makes sense to me. If you've made it this far, it's because these reflections touched something deep within you, and that's already a sign that we're connected on this journey. Every word we share in this video was designed to awaken awareness, bring peace, and offer a new perspective on life, death, and everything in between. So if this content resonated with you, subscribe to the channel. Here, each video is an opportunity to delve deeper into this universe of learning and spiritual discovery, and your presence helps keep this energy of exchange and growth alive. And if you resonated with these experiences, leave a comment saying, "I'm with you until the end. I want to know who was here," following every detail and feeling every reflection along with me. This kind of participation is what transforms this community into a living space, where each person shares their own journey and strengthens everyone's experience. You also leave your like, naturally, as a gesture of connection to everything we explore together. Each like is like a silent nod that says, "I'm here, I feel, I understand," and this creates a flow of positive energy, which keeps the message circulating and reaching people who, like you, seek meaning and inspiration. And look, there's a video right here that complements this topic, full of reflections and revelations that connect with everything we've discussed today. Click and stay with me there, because there's still much to discover, feel, and transform within your own journey. The experience doesn't end here. In fact, it's just beginning. And each step we take together brings us a little closer to understanding the greatness of who we are and where we come from.